Now available, paperback and Kindle Unlimited. ISIS, the main event. It's carnage inside of a steel cage when the goddess next door steps in the squared circle with the beast from the boss in this action-packed all-new ISIS series adventure. Get ISIS, the main event, paperback and Kindle Unlimited today.
Former Miami Dolphins head coach Brian Flores has filed a class action lawsuit against the NFL, including teams such as the New York Giants, Denver Broncos, and Miami Dolphins, claiming racial discrimination in the league's hiring process for coaches and executives. Now, your Brian Flores alleges he was discriminated against because he had interviewed for the head coach position of the New York Giants, and after doing the interview for the New York Giants head coach position, he received text messages from New England Patriots head coach Bill Belichick demonstrating that the Giants were going to hire Brian Daboll as their head coach, even while they were interviewing with him. Now, your Brian Flores alleges that the Giants only interviewed him only to satisfy the NFL's Rooney Rule mandate requiring teams interview minority candidates. Now, when I take a critical examination of Brian Flores' allegations, I have to believe that they are true. And the reason why I have to believe they are true is because I experienced the same kind of discrimination here when I was applying for the CUNY office assistant position at the City University of New York. Now, when it comes down to these people, when they are hiring black men, they practice a very insidious kind of discrimination. And they will go out here and interview the black candidate just to meet the standards as related for diversity, but they have no intentions of ever hiring said individual. And I ran into this kind of discrimination when I was applying for the position of CUNY office assistant, a entry-level administrative position, and what the HR people did there was, yes, they would interview heterosexual black men, but they would always find a way to avoid hiring heterosexual black men because they could go out here and hire a black woman or a Latina woman or an Asian woman and be able to meet the diversity quota by killing two birds with one stone. And they would be able to hire that woman and that minority and check off those diversity boxes, and they would not have to go out here and hire a straight black man in order to work that position. And that's the kind of discrimination I ran into when I applied for their hiring pools, and I ran into employers who practically would just interview me just for the sake of checking off the diversity box. But when it came time to go out here and hire someone, they would go out here and either hire a black woman, a Hispanic woman, an Asian woman, or a gay black man. So they would be able to participate in talking about diversity passively, but then aggressively be making efforts to do everything in their power to avoid hiring a straight black man. And that's how they use technicalities to discriminate against straight black men, because many employers just don't want straight black men in positions like your CUNY office assistant, which are really low-level positions, and they definitely, I know for a fact, don't want any straight black men in positions of power, because I ran into that same kind of discrimination when I applied for another CUNY position in 2010, where it was an IT assistant position making $45,000 a year, and I met all of the qualifications for said position, but they decided at the interview to change the qualifications, showing again more discriminatory practices that were participated at the City University of New York. Now, if this left-leaning college institution would participate in this kind of discrimination, you know that the NFL, America's modern slave plantation, also participates in this kind of discrimination. And when I listen to Brian Flores' story, it definitely has the ring of truth, and it has the ring of truth because when I listen to his position, I see what they did to me back at the City University of New York, and I can relate to what happened here because what many of these corporations will do is they will go out here and interview a qualified black candidate on a formality in order to meet the so-called diversity standards, but they've already made up their mind to hire some white person or some other minority, and this is done again to passively meet the standards for so-called diversity while aggressively denying a qualified black man an opportunity at employment. And that's what makes this type of discrimination really insidious and hard to go out here and be able to substantiate because a lot of these owners, what they're doing is they go out here and they'll interview enough minorities to avoid saying that they're racist, and they'll go out here and hire those minorities or those women so that they can go out here and be able to meet their diversity check boxes passively, but aggressively. When you look around, you don't see any heterosexual black men in positions of management or positions of power like a head coach position. And we can clearly see that there's possibly a pattern of discrimination in the NFL, which has 70% black players, but there are next to no coaches or executives in positions of power. I find it interesting that the players can go out here and play the game and be black, but there are no black men in positions of coaching these days or in the front office going out here recruiting talent. No, most of those positions today are predominantly held by white males, and that really shows how they're trying to consolidate power as related to the positions of leadership. So basically, what your Brian Flores is trying to show us is that the NFL clearly is discriminating against black men and making an effort to keep black men out of positions of power in a game that is played by 70% black men, and most of those players are not getting to see persons like themselves in leadership positions, and that is very troubling because I remember back in '89 when Art Shell was the first black NFL coach for the Raiders, and that was considered to be a major event at that time. And what I'm sadly seeing now is that we are regressing as related to black men getting positions of power in the NFL, and the NFL is looking more and more like a slave plantation because yes, you can have the big black players playing the game, but you cannot have them coaching the game and providing leadership to the other players because the white owners don't seem to trust black men in positions of leadership or power, and that really says something about the racist culture at the NFL. But most people, they don't really understand how insidious this is because they don't understand that this type of discrimination is deliberately designed to deny black men any sort of position of leadership or position of power where they can have decision-making policies and implement decision-making on the day-to-day as related to the team. That's something many of the white owners don't trust black men to be able to do, and that's really racist and discriminatory when you think about it. But it's really hard to prove this kind of racism in the corporate world, and that's something I found out when I went out here and made a claim of discrimination at the City University of New York, and their HR people practically said, oh, it's not substantiated, even though I heard from many black men on my blog who said that they ran into the same type of discrimination. Even though there was a civil service union, you had HR people who were willfully and intentionally discriminating against heterosexual black men, and because they had a black woman or a Spanish woman or an Asian woman in the HR job at the hiring, they believed that they were all a part of the so-called diversity, But when you look at who was getting hired, the black men were not getting hired on the regular, and they were not being granted the same opportunities as the women, and they would use these other minorities as buffers to go out here and avoid having to hire black men. And that's what's happening here with your Brian Flores, is they are out here discriminating against him, and he's a pretty good coach. And if he's gone out here and gone out here and led teams, he should be given a chance to go out here. Now, I find it quite troubling that there are many black coaches sitting on the sidelines, many who have taken teams to playoffs, and they are not getting hired. And you would think an NFL that is all about trying to get to the Super Bowl, it would be all about trying to hire the best coaches who could get your team to the Super Bowl. Unfortunately, so many black coaches are sitting on the sidelines, and it's all, I believe, due to racism and white supremacy, because this is not about winning, it's about making sure that white men are the ones in charge, and that's the only way white supremacy believes that it's winning. White supremacy only wins when they believe all the people in positions of power are white, and that white supremacy seems to be more important to the NFL than going out here and trying to find the best coaches in order to win on the merits. No, what they want to do is make sure that nobody black gets power and is in an empowered position, because they fear if there's a black man telling black players what to do, that might lead to some pushback against ownership, and this may lead to the complete collapse of the NFL slave plantation. So this is all about taking power away from the players and ensuring that the power stays with the owners, because once you start to put black men into positions of power, they start pushing back against the owners, and even some might start to get the vision to start thinking about being owners in the future. So this is all about trying to break down the black coaches and make sure that they're not in leadership positions, because they fear that these leaders may start leading the league into a direction where it is no longer a slave plantation. So your Brian Flores is only finding out that the NFL is just as white supremacist as any other business, whether it be on the left or the right, like the City University of New York, which is on the left, and the NFL, which is in the so-called center. They all practice the same discriminatory practices whenever it comes down to hiring black men for positions. And this could be a position as low as a CUNY office assistant, which only paid $26,000 a year at the time, and all the way up to a six-figure position like one that a head coach has in the NFL. It's all about ensuring that whites remain in power and their buffer class minorities, and ensuring that no black man ever rises to a position of power. And that's the hard lesson that your Brian Flores learned when he did this interview with the New York Giants, and experienced the same kind of discrimination I experienced whenever I applied for the CUNY office assistant position or the IT assistant position at the City University of New York. And this whole incident again shows how deep the racism goes in the job market, and how black men are oftentimes denied that so-called equal opportunity to be able to gain employment and the ability to get economic power and be able to move their lives forward. The reason why a lot of black men like myself struggle is because we run into discrimination in the job market, and we're often denied opportunities at employment that would allow us to be able to move ourselves forward. We have the qualifications and the skills, but oftentimes many employers don't want to hire a black man because some believe in racist stereotypes about black men being lazy. Others just fear competing against black men because they fear that if a black man comes in and surpasses their so-called expectations, they would have to actually step up their game. So whenever they see a straight black man entering the room, they start to get scared. And then there's that small handful that fear that heterosexual black men on the job want these white women on the job. And I can tell you, as a straight black man, I have no interest in any of those white females on the job. But you got some simps who fear that if a black man comes on the job, he's going to go after all of the women and take all of the ladies. And that's something that they fear, and that's why they don't want to hire straight black men. They fear competing against the straight black man. They fear having to step up their game, and that's why they would rather have a mediocre NFL slave plantation than go out here and elevate this game and take it to the next level by hiring the best coaches on merit. That's what they don't want to do, because truly we see that the NFL is not about making sure that black people rise to another level. They only want black players to be plantation bucks going out here and doing slave labor on the NFL slave plantation. Now, if you want to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. And if you want to pick up some of my positive black fiction on the SJS Direct imprint, like the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, the John Haynes series, and the books of the Spencerella trilogy, you can find those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them on Smashwords, the iBook Store, and Google Play. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.
Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited. John Haynes, the man with nothing to lose. The man who rules the world runs into the irresistible force of a man with nothing to lose in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get the regular and variant editions of John Haynes, the man with nothing to lose.